Wait, no, wait till we... Hey, Jonathan?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Yeah, I was actually the person that unmuted everybody, and yes, I can see the chat window. So
okay, wonderful. So what we're going to do is, because when we go into the product, I will not be able to see the questions window, so Ed will be monitoring it, and he'll let me know if there's any questions. Okay, so it's 5 after, so let's get started. It looks like we have a few folks on. Again, the more interactive this is, the better. So please feel free to jump in, with questions. For the informative webinars, we normally wait until the end, but I think for this, it's generally going to be something that we'd like to address right away, because if one person has the questions, it's likely that others will as well. Okay. So again, I won't see them, but Ed will jump in and let me know if there's any questions. Okay, so thank you all for joining. This is the actual first in a series of Accelatis training webinars. Today we're going to be talking about alerting and reporting configuration, really focusing on the various places that we can set alerts and how to configure the notifications and other actions. So bear with us while we work through the kinks of the webinar system. And again, our hope is that this can be something that's interactive and people can feel free to jump in with questions. Our goal is to get Accelatis prospects and clients familiar with the functionality and kind of facilitate a more open community where our prospects and customers can communicate with each other about how they're using the system. Okay. So at this point, what we're going to be talking about is really a couple things. We'll talk about, again, it's about alerting, and we're going to start out, we'll discuss what an alert is and what a trigger is, and how the different types of alerts, how notifications can be set up, and other types of properties that can go along with them. We'll also cover the various places that triggers can be defined. Again, we'll focus on the current commercial version 2.0. Every now and then I'm going to jump over to the new version 3.0 just to show that all the core functionality is the same. There's a couple of new options. So I'll jump over to the new UI just to show those details, but the majority of what we're doing will be in the current 2.1 version. We'll also talk about what a notification is and the different types of options of what we can do after an alert is generated, where it could be just being notified, or an action could be taken, or even a report could be taken after the action to give us more information. And then we'll actually walk through a couple of scenarios where we'll force a couple of failures in real time while we're on the phone, and we'll see how the system responds to it. And then we'll show, again, kind of going along the different types of notifications, a simple alert, a notification with an action, and then something a little more complex. Okay, so with that, at first, actually, let's take a step back and understand that when we talk about alerting is part of the monitoring aspect of Accelatis. So when we talk about Accelatis Ascension Suite, it's an application performance management system. Most people hear application performance management and they immediately think of monitoring, and monitoring is a core part of it. It's actually one part of what the Ascension Suite does. And within monitoring, what Accelatis does that's value add to Hyperion customers is that we monitor at the component level, and we also monitor a broad array of aspects, things like not just runtime performance counters, but also health checks at the component level. We monitor log files, data, configuration, so things that are very specific to a Hyperion environment, and those are the things that we'll cover today. Okay. Here's just a kind of a graphical view of what the monitoring and alerting is with respect to the system, and what we can see is that we have a Hyperion environment that's running, and this could be production or dev or test, and we have different users performing activities in the system, and in that middle box is really the different types of things that we're monitoring, and all of these can generate alerts based on certain activities. So whether it's KPIs, which are your performance counters at the highest level, these are things like CPU and memory and maybe user load. When we talk about component health, these are things like whether services are up or down, or whether databases are responding in time. SLAs, this is a new concept in 3.0. This is really about the end user experience and the response time that end users are getting when they perform certain activities like opening a report or running a form. And of course, we look at logs and activities that are happening in logs, or maybe patterns of activities. And then other things that are very essential to a performing Hyperion deployment are things like network, as well as what's going on with your data, as well as configuration. So these are all the things that we monitor and all things that can generate alerts. And ultimately, in some cases, if we can automatically remediate the issue, so we're alerting that a service is down. If we can restart the service as a very simple example, then that's great. Then that's one less thing that the admin has to do. But if nothing else, we can actually send an alert based on a trigger and then provide the ad hoc tools to manually remediate the problem. So that's a high-level view of monitoring. So right now what we'll do is we're going to jump over to the product, and what I'm actually doing is I'm going to be running this. Let's see. I'm running this on an image, so I no longer see the chat window, but Ed will monitor the questions. So if you do have any questions, please ask the question in the webinar, and Ed will jump in and will answer it in real time. And like I said, I have both the current 2.1 version open as well as the 3.0 version. And the purpose of showing 3.0 is really just to show that the core things we're talking about apply in the new version as well. There's a couple of new options that will show, but ultimately the core functionality is all the same. So the first thing is, let's actually look at alerting properties. So we all think of alerts as when we're notified of a problem in the system. Okay? So if you go to Options, Alerting Rules, there's the Alert Rules window. And at the very top we have our list of environments, so we're at production. And alerting properties can be set by severity by environment. So out of the box we have 5 different severities. And a severity could actually represent a high to low, a high severity versus a low severity, or it could represent something a little more abstract where maybe we use like severities 4 and 5, might be a high and low for a technical audience, where severities 1, 2, and 3 are high, medium, low for a broader audience. So when we define a trigger threshold, whether it's health or KPI, we assign it a severity. And again, it's really up to you as to how you want to use it. I would say the majority of customers use it on the high to low basis, but it's possible that, again, they get used on a more abstract level. And for each severity, we can set the notification properties. So for example, all alerts will show up in our messages queue. So you're all familiar with, let's leave this for just a second. You're all familiar with the messages queue. So all alerts will show up there regardless of what we set here. So it might be that for severity 5, if we go with the premise that severity 5 is low, severity 1 is high, we could say that for severity 5, these are so low that we want to know about it, but we don't need to know about it in real time. As long as we know about it within a day or so, that's fine. So we're not even going to send an email. We're just going to let it show up in our messages queue, and when we get to it, we get to it. But it might be for, let's say, severity 3. Okay, this is something that severity 3, this is something we want to deal with. It needs to be dealt with within, let's say, a day or so. It may not be critical, doesn't mean the system is down, but it's something that could cause aggravation. So this is going to go to maybe a very specific audience. So this goes to, IT support, at company.com, just as an example. And in some cases, the sender address could be as simple as agent, or we'll call this Accelatis agent at company.com. Depending on how your SMTP settings are configured, this may need to be a valid address. So what we found is at some customers, if you put a random address, the email will never go out because it actually validates the sender address, so that if you don't know that, when we do the configuration, we find out very quickly whether that's the case or not. But in this case, the email goes out to this one address, severity 3. And for example, severity 1 might be something where this is something that needs to be addressed immediately. So this goes out to IT support, company.com, and it goes out to admins, company.com. So this can go out to multiple addresses, and again, the logic is that a severity 1, if we use it as the basis, that's more important. It could go out to a different group of people. And so we can do this for each severity, and ultimately out of the box, all triggers are severity 5. So you'd have to explicitly go in and change a severity to something higher, and we'll show how to do that next. Okay. So the next thing is okay, so all alerts will go into our inbox. Alternatively, we can send emails. Another option is to generate what's called an SNMP trap, and this is useful for customers who have an existing help desk ticketing system or monitoring tool. Something like HP OpenView can leverage this, and this is where they have they've standardized on their notification mechanism, where everything should go through this centralized tool. And in this case, Accelatis is happy to detect the alert and send it off to some other tool. So it's possible that we actually don't send an email at all, but we generate a trap. And what a trap is, without getting into too much detail, it's a simple network notification, if you will, that gets broadcast. And if something's looking for that broadcast, an SNMP monitoring tool like HP OpenView, it'll pick it up and then display it. So effectively, we generate this little notification. The HP system could pick it up, and then it sends out the email or generates a help desk ticket or whatever it might be. So I know a couple of our customers have these now. If this is something that you're using, talk to us and we'll help you get it set up properly. But otherwise, so you have the 3 options: message queue, email, SNMP trap, or a combination of those. Okay. The next thing we want to look at is this option here of not repeating alerts for a certain amount of time. So just for example, let's take one of the simplest examples of an alert could be detecting if a service is down. Okay, and many tools do this. It's kind of one of the easier things to check. Now, if depending on the frequency that we're checking for that condition, it could be every couple of minutes, it could be every couple of hours. But the question is, if we detect it every couple of minutes, you likely do not want to be spammed every time we detect the condition that there is a problem. Because if you don't get to it for an hour, you could rack up 20 emails that, hey, the service is down. Well, okay, you know about it, you have to get to it. So for every severity, you can define a time of when you want to be notified. 1,440 minutes is 24 hours, I believe. So this says, hey, severity 5 issues, these need to be fixed, they're really not critical. Once you send me an alert, don't tell me again for an hour, or I mean for a day, because I'm going to take a couple hours to get to it. Where severity 3 alerts, as an example, this might be something where, listen, we need to get these addressed, but it doesn't have to be addressed right away. So this could be something where every 2 hours, tell me, because maybe I think I fixed it, but if it shows up again within 2 hours, tell me again, because I need to get back in there because I can't let this hanging out there for so long. And then a severity 1 might be, listen, we need to drop everything, fix this right away. I still need a couple minutes to address it. So this might be something like every 30 minutes. And what that means is once you get alerted for any severity 1 issue, you will not be alerted again for at least 30 minutes. So in the background, we're still detecting that there's a problem, and we call that the trigger. The trigger is when we detect the condition, but the alert is when an actual notification happens. So with this setting right here, it's saying do not send the notification, whatever that might be, whether it's a trap or email or otherwise, for at least 30 minutes. And this is generally how it breaks down. High severity ones have a much shorter do not repeat alert window, and this is just because we need to get in there, it needs to be fixed, and if it's not fixed, we need to know right away that it's not fixed. And as you get lesser and lesser severities, these are things that just can take more time to get addressed. Okay. So this can be done again per environment, per severity. We have these options. Now we also have a global option called alert suppression, and this is relevant if you are doing a, let's say, a weekly reboot. You know, the Accelatis agents come up, and while the system is being restarted, there's going to be a period of time when things are not running, whether it's Windows services or, you know, things could take a long time to come up. And if the agents come up, you know, if they're set to come up quickly, they're off and running, and they're saying, hey, you know, this service isn't up, this process isn't there, I can't probe this URL. So it might be something where on a weekly basis, we do our reboots, let's say, Sunday at 2 a.m. And maybe it usually takes 2 hours for everything to settle down. So what we can do is number of hours, so we can just say 2. So what this does is it says, during this window, do not send any alerts. We're still detecting the triggers, but we know that there's going to be alerts here. Don't spam me. Okay. In the newer version, it's really the same options that you saw before. The difference now is you can have multiple suppression windows. So if you have a multiple weekly reboots or multiple maintenance windows, or maybe there's going to be a one-time option, then what you could do is you could set up your weekly suppression window and then even set up a one-time option, because we know on this day we're going to be doing some work. And what that'll do, again, if any alerts fall in, occur during that time, the alert will just not be sent out. Okay. So since I'm not hearing from Ed, I'm going to assume that there's no questions. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the different places that we can establish triggers. So again, alert is a notification, a trigger is the condition happening. So we'll start with probably one of the most important ones, which is health. Okay, and then we'll talk about KPIs, then we'll talk about log alerts, and then I'll briefly mention SLAs, which is a new thing in 3.0. Okay. But again, a trigger is any type of condition that we detect in the system. And now usually we don't jump into the health window because there's a lot of data here, but since this is a training session, this is, we're going to get into some of these details. But what I have here is I have the health module open, and we're looking at all the health checks that we have out of the box. And I might have added one or two custom ones. No, these are all out of the box. And you'll see some red X's, and actually we're doing a lot of work on here, testing various things, so we've intentionally forced various things to fail. And one of the examples later is we're actually going to force something to fail. We're going to see right in the screen that it detects that item failing, and it kicks off a job to fix it, and then it fixes it, and we see that it then is successful. So in here we see our various health check items. We can review these in more detail or create custom ones by going into the Connectivity Designer, which is this icon right here, a little hand on a document. And here we have 3 tabs. We have user-defined items, remote clients, and built-in items. So built-in items are the ones that come out of the box. We can add as many user-defined health checks as we want, and we can assign health checks to remote clients. And on our 3.0 version over here, I have multiple remote clients running, and if you want, one of our checks is going to be to force a remote client to fail to see how that picks up. But what we'll look at are some of these built-in checks. And some of the things, and you're probably familiar with these, but some of the things we look at, again, at the highest level are simple things like whether services are running. We also have URL probing, so we can probe the web applications. We have some more detailed checks where we're communicating at the component level, so HFM applications. So this is a check where even if the HSV data source is running, we're programmatically communicating to the application. So if we detect that we cannot communicate to it, even if HSV data source is running, even if other users are successfully connected, we still log it as a failure because new users are unable to connect it, so it's unavailable. So we have various types of checks. We can either do database checks where we check the connectivity of a database, or even run a very simple query and can trigger on whether the query takes too long or not. But let's look at one of the simplest cases. So we'll come down here to, with the HFM Web plugin, one of the things it's doing is it's going to check whether IS is running, because IS is necessary for HFM Web to be running. So we're going to double click on this item, and here we can see the properties. Now these are grayed out because these come out of the box. We cannot change these because these are built in, but we do have a couple of options over here on the right. So first, let's just see that by default, the health check is going to, a service health check will fail if the service is not running. So it's very simple. It's whether it's up or down. Other health checks, and actually I come over here to user defined. So HTTP request is basically a URL probe that will trigger if the URL, if the web application returns a failure code. Okay. Process check will return if the process is not found, if it's not running. Service will fail if the service is not in the started state. So even if the service is detected but it's in the stop state, that will return a failure. We can do whether file shares or files exists. We can also do ping checks, whether a ping fails, and then so on. We can also do things like whether a database is running. So these are what we call hard failures, meaning it's either it's yellow or green or red, it's running or not. Okay. And if it's failed, it will cause a trigger. Another place we can look at triggers are in KPIs. And a KPI is anything that you can see within Windows. So if you go to perfmon, you'll see all the things that are available in Windows. And in Accelatis, we also have things, product-specific KPIs. So we have S-based database statistics. For SmartView, we have things like the number of SmartView requests that have been opened per minute or per hour. And for like reports, we have the number of reports that have been opened per minute or per hour. But configuring a KPI trigger is something that would be very, similar to perfmon, where we just come in. This is our processor trigger, and this could be something as simple as we're going to generate a low a low severity trigger. Let's say a severity 5, if our CPU is over 70%, but we're going to generate a severity 2 trigger if we're over 90%, and we can then enable this. And now we will get we will trigger on if we ever cross those thresholds. Something else we could do is we could look at things like user load, which might be a little more relevant, where if we know that, or if you know that you have issues when there's more than 200 users on a system, and we have a lot of issues when there's more than 300 users on a system, then here's another way that we can set those triggers. So all of these other KPIs are there for reporting, but we've just enabled these two. So out of the box, we're not triggering on these other KPIs. You have to you define the KPI, then you have to explicitly come in and set the threshold on which to trigger. Okay. And for those who don't know, we're next to a train station, and it's must be 11:28 because we have a train going by. So those are KPI triggers. Okay. I'm going to jump over really quickly to we call this the alerts module. In 3.0, we actually call this log alerts. We call it alerts because there's more than just log events that we can trigger on. So there's different types of, there's different things we can trigger on. We can trigger on whether a log gets over a certain size, whether we detect a certain pattern of events in the log. We can detect if our deployment, if there's any mismatches among servers, or if any settings change, configuration settings change, we just might want to know that, or if a single log event happens. And like with the others, for every trigger, we can set a severity. I'll briefly touch on, in the 3.0 version, we have a new module called SLAs. And SLAs are basically their service level agreements, which means for user performance. So as we track user activities, whether it's reports or planning forms or planning calcs or something in HFM, we can establish thresholds that say all of our financial reports should run in less than 20 seconds, for example. And we can come in and say, okay, so here it is. So for financial reports, we can say they all should run in, let's say, 15 seconds. And I want to know if they start running in more than 10 seconds. This is a low severity, or 15 seconds will generate a high severity trigger. So SLAs, again, it's more about tracking the end user experience and being alerted when the end users are experiencing performance beyond a certain threshold that we've set. But in terms of the other ones, in 3.0 you can see that it's really the same as in 2.0. I will mention one new piece, and that is when we're setting a trigger, whether it's KPIs, health, log alerts, or SLAs, in addition to being able setting the low and high thresholds, there's some more granularity coming in the new release, which is setting where we don't just trigger on a single event, but we can trigger on patterns. So for like that CPU example, in the 2.1 version, it will trigger if it detects one data sample at that level, which may not be great. It could just be an anomaly that our CPUs were up that high. But in the new version, we can say, okay, if we get 3 data samples in a row that meet this criteria, then trigger. So there's more granularity in terms of setting the triggers. And this is available in both for KPIs as well as health checks. And actually, any place you can define a trigger, we have this new level of granularity where it won't just trigger on one data sample, but you can set the pattern for it to trigger on. Okay. So again, KPIs, health checks, log alerts, and then coming forward, we can also trigger on SLAs. Okay. Actually, let me just jump back to my notes to see what. Okay, so we covered these. Okay, so let's talk about what the notifications and what our options are in terms of notifications. So we'll take a very simple example. So we did mention, first of all, we mentioned that the notifications are messages, emails, or SNMP traps. But now we can also take action on a trigger, or on an alert rather. So it's one thing to be notified of it. Okay, so we know that a particular service is down, for example. We may actually want to do something about it. So if we look at, let's come back into where we were, and we're going to look at the HFM Web IIS check. It's one thing to know that we will generate a severity 5 trigger or alert on this failure, but if we can go a step further and maybe do something about it, so maybe, okay, if we detect that something is down, obviously what we want to do is get it back up again. And the very simplest case is a service going down, we want to restart it. So over in automation, which you're probably all familiar with, we can define a flow, and each flow can contain multiple tasks. And a task can really be, it could be anything which is, any of our reports that we provide. It could be an external building block like running a script, managing a service, sending an email, or doing some type of wait. Or it could be product specific, things that might be available in Essbase or HFM or some of the other products. So in this example, manually, if I wanted to restart IIS, I would actually do 2 things. I would create, you saw that there was that service management block, so I just created a flow which will restart, basically start IIS. We could do lots of things with it, but in this case, we're going to restart IIS. In the case of IIS, it also relies on the World Wide Web publishing service. So I created a flow that's going to start these 2 services. And now what I want to do is say, okay, back in our health check, let's go back into this particular check, and in addition to just generating a trigger, let's actually pick that automation flow which is going to fix the problem. So in this case, I had that automation flow that I created, and I'm just going to select it. Okay, so here it is. So if we detect that IIS is down, we are going to automatically trigger this automation flow, which should fix the problem. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to run this. We're going to run this right now. And here we are in our health module. And actually, before I run this, are there any questions about what we've said so far about the types of triggers and just the nature of having a remediation task in automation? Okay, so we don't see any questions, so we'll actually just demonstrate this. So here, what we can see is right now, I want you to focus on two things. We can see HFM web application and IIS on this particular machine are running and they're healthy. And I'm going to rerun this health check right now just to show you that as of this moment, these are all running and they're healthy. So these are all green checks. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to stop. I'm going to manually stop the IIS service. And then what the system will do is it'll detect that the IIS service is down. It's going to trigger. The trigger is going to cause an alert, so we will get notified of it, and it'll automatically kick off the job to restart IIS, actually restart both of those services, and then our little check should come up green again. Now, this all will happen automatically in the background. Right now we're in the user interface, but even without the user interface, these health checks are running on a certain frequency. Right now it's every 10 minutes. In the updated version, you can actually set the granularity to differ not only by health check type, but by health check itself. So service checks, which really are very quick and don't cost much CPU, could be set for every minute or every 2 minutes, where URL probing or maybe user simulations could be set at every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes. But in this case, just because we have limited time, I'm going to manually stop IIS, and then I'm going to force the health check to run. Again, it will happen on its own. I'm going to force it. We'll actually see a couple things. We'll see them showing up as failures. We'll see that we got an alert. We'll also see a note that we kicked off the job to restart IIS. And then we'll see that these turn green again because IIS is back up and running. So the downtime would have been limited because the system automatically addressed the issue. So let's go ahead and do this. So here I am in, actually refresh, this should be started. Okay. So here I am in my services module. I'm actually going to physically stop this. Okay, it's stopping these other services as well. That's fine. Okay. Now again, if we left this to run on its own, it would automatically detect and alert and then restart, but we're going to force it. So when I click this button, it forces the system to do a health check. So we're just going to do this interactively. And now what we see at this moment in time, we actually see a couple things, and I want to point out something really important. We see that IIS failed, HFM web failed, we see Office Provider failed, and actually it looks at IIS as well. Now this is relevant because not only did we detect that IIS failed, but we also detected that HFM is failing because HFM relies on IIS. That's fine. But in a real deployment, no user is going to call you up and say that IIS is failing. They're going to call and say, hey, HFM is failing, I can't get into it. And we actually have one of our clients who experienced this, and they spent a great deal of time reconfiguring HFM. I think they actually reinstalled it and then realized that the problem was actually IIS. So the source of the issue wasn't HFM. The source of the issue was under the covers. It was IIS itself. So with this system, you'd be alerted that HFM failed and IIS failed. And looking at that, you'd know, okay, I don't have to worry about HFM. I can go right to the source of the problem. So we see that this failed, and we get a notification that, it looks like IIS failed. And you also see that we kicked off the job to restart IIS. Okay, so if I come back into my services window and I do a refresh, we see that IIS is back up and running, and it's because Accelatis automatically restarted it. So now if I refresh, if I rerun the health check or refresh it, we should see that IIS and HFM are back up. I think SmartView might still be down, but this is because we're goofing with it on another test we're running. But what we see now is that IIS is back up and HFM is back up. So what we did was we detected that IIS was down. We also detected that HFM was down. We automatically kicked off the job to fix it. It restarted the service, and we can see now that it comes full circle that this is back up and running again. Now again, if we weren't using UI, this would all have happened in the background. So you would have been notified of the trigger and the alert, and this would have happened. Now, one thing to point out is that, let me come back up here to alerting rules. For all of our alerts, in this case, I have the do not repeat alerts at 1440 minutes, which is 1 day. So if I were to, so if I were to stop this again, we would not be notified of the problem because we said don't alert me again for that amount of time. So just be aware that when you set the window, that you will not get that second notification because we've already alerted once. Now going forward, we'll have a flag where they can be reset once a problem is fixed. But right now, that window means that we will not get another alert of this type for however long that window is set. Okay. So I want to show another example, and I'm going to do this in 3.0 because this is where we have our remote performance clients running. Okay, so let me start this. So the test I'm going to do is actually, excuse me, let's refresh this. And again, there's a lot more detail here. I don't want to go into all the detail unless there's questions, but I want to point out that I have a couple of remote clients running. So if we, just as an example, in our dashboards view, we kind of have this graphical view of all of our remote locations. So here I have, okay, I have the London office is blinking red. This is an alert we're getting. I have different locations as green, and these are all represent remote clients. In this case, I'm actually running everything on one machine. I have one running from my host, and it's connecting to another image I have. So this particular check right here, if we look at the example, what you could say is, okay, this particular check is a remote location that is pinging, let's say it's our data center. So I have another image which represents our data center. And this is healthy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to that image, and I'm going to shut that image down. I'm going to pause it, which means this would fail. And how this is different, so this is actually not just a health check that's running with our environment, but this is a health check that is running on another it's running on another server entirely. Okay, so this is as if you have a location around the world where users are connecting to it, and you have a health check that is showing their connectivity back to your data center or wherever the servers are. So the value of this is being notified when there's a problem for that user community. Now we can also do all sorts of other things, which include tracking performance from those locations, running user simulations from those locations. This is a very simple one, just saying, listen, we cannot connect from that location. So in this case, on its own, again, this remote performance client every couple of minutes is going to ping that the data center, and it will report the failure if it fails. What I'm going to do, again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to force that check to run. So I'm just going to come back up here and run a manual capture on my remote performance client. And that'll just take a minute to run. So in another minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh, and then we should see that this now comes up failed, which would mean that the remote client detected there was a problem, and it sent its results back to the Accelatis system, and the admins would therefore be notified. Okay, we'll just give this a minute. And we have 15 minutes left, so I just wanted to demonstrate that particular variation on a health check, and then we're going to go into something a little more elaborate. So what we've discussed was a simple alert. We've discussed an alert tied to a remediation task. Now we're discussing very quickly, it's a simple alert, but it's from a remote location, so how we can detect centrally something that's going on outside. And then let's see whether, let's just do a refresh. Okay, this must still be shutting down, or it's still probably running in the background. So let's do this. We'll give that a moment to run. Let's talk about a little more elaborate remediation task. So I'm going to go into automation, and again, we can create any type of flow here with regard to whether we want to run it ad hoc, scheduled, whether it's the result of some type of trigger. And again, we can do this, actually we can do this in 2.0. We can do this in 2.0 as well. But because we're waiting for that remote thing, we'll do this here. But the modules are really the same. So let's take an example of a case where an HFM application is not responding. And it might be that other users are currently in an application and they're successful, but new users are unable to connect. Now, as administrators, what you might do in a case like this is give the users who are in a chance to complete their work and then force the application to restart and then tell everyone, hey, it's safe to come back into the application again. So we created a simple flow which would kind of represent what you could do as an administrator, which is if we detect that HFM, a single application is down, we can send out an email to the user community saying, hey, there's a problem with the app, we're going to restart it in 5 or 10 minutes. Then we can actually wait 10 minutes. Then we restart that specific application, and this is done without restarting the server. It's just restarting that application. And then you send out another email that says, hey, the application is back up again. So this is a little more detailed remediation task than just restarting the alert. And what we can do here is in the health check, we could tie the health check where we're actually communicating with the HFM application to this flow. So it could automatically fix the app if we ever detect that we can't communicate to it. Okay. But now what we can also do is it's all fine and good that we are trying to correct the problem. And what the administrator would normally do is say, oh, I'm having a problem, there's a problem with the application. They would likely come in here and they may run some type of report. So in Accelatis we offer, and these are available in 2.1 as well, we offer a couple of reports. We offer a performance report which shows all types of performance metrics and data and health check responses and response times. And we also have something called a user activity report which shows us what users have been doing on the system. Okay, so if I'm an administrator and I get this alert saying, hey, there's a problem, I'm likely going to come in and I'm going to visually look at performance data and I'm going to run a report that shows me what users have done in the system. And we can also get this information in an ad hoc form in the activity analysis module, but a report is a nice way to do it if we're working remotely. So it might be that what we want to do here is not only perform this remediation task, but we may also want to, at the same time, automatically generate these reports. So we're going to generate a performance report. We're also going to generate a user activity report because I want to know what was going on in the system while this happened. And what we can do is we can actually move these up. So what we will do is the system will automatically, it's going to send it, the first thing it's going to do is blast an email out to everyone saying, hey, we're going to restart that application, save your work. And then while it's waiting, it's going to send a performance report, which could contain any type of performance graph that we've already created. It could be anything, things like what's going on in HFM, or if this were a planning problem, what's going on in planning. So I get some information on the activity happening in planning, what the KPIs are, etc. And then we can also have a user activity report, which is going to show me who is doing what. And we can set this up for, say, the last 30 minutes or the last hour. So what will happen is we'll blast the user base. The administrators will not only get the alert, but they will also get a report emailed to them. So if they're if they're on their day off, or better yet, maybe they're at lunch, right on their iPhone, they will get the alert. They will get a report that shows what users were doing leading up to, in the hour leading up to the problem, so that they can very quickly start getting a feel for what was happening in the system, even if they're not at their desk, even if they're not in front of Accelatis. So we can do this automatic generation of reports along with remediation tasks. Okay, let me just go back and see that this should have had time to fail. I'm just going to jump out here again and didn't mean to show everyone the details here. Ping data from remote node. We might have pinged it before it had a chance to, before the image was down. Let's try this one more time, and if not, I'll just look at this later. But the idea here is that these, again, the remote performance clients, for those who haven't incorporated these yet, are little, basically agents that will run out on your various locations around the world, and they're all controlled centrally. So from the Accelatis console, you can program these remote performance clients to perform various tasks. And here we actually we can start them and stop them and disable them. And we went into the Health Check Designer. If you remember, there was that remote client tab. This is where we define the types of tests that we want those remote clients to run. And in this case, you can do ping checks, or you can do user simulations or URL probing. And again, if there's ever any errors, they get reported back to the core system, and excuse me, and you'd be notified just as you would if the error had happened locally. So it's really taking all this global performance data and bringing it back into one place. Okay, and I'm going to stop here. I have to look over and see whether I actually successfully shut that image down. But what this is, oh, I'm on the wrong one. Yeah. I would think that we should be seeing a failure here. I'd have to go into the other image and see whether it actually shut down or not. But instead of kind of spending a lot of time on that, I really want to open it up for questions with the few minutes that we have left.
I'm going to hit the unmute. I'm going to unmute everybody.
Okay.
Okay. All right, everyone, you're unmuted. Okay. Everyone, you're unmuted. Okay. Everyone, you're unmuted.
Okay. And Ed, maybe you better mute everyone again.
Muted.
Yeah, that was a lot of noise.
Unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, if just so everyone knows, if on a GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, if you're on the phone, then in the GoToMeeting or in the GoToWebinar audio thing, you should check using phone, because otherwise what will happen is you'll be on both your phone and your microphone, and we'll get that kind of feedback loop. So we're looking at the questions window, and I don't know that we see any questions, so we'll wait another minute, but I just want to recap what we discussed was the different places that we can set up triggers, how triggers can send alerts, how we can configure alerts by severity and define what those notifications are, and we also looked at how alerts can then trigger remediation tasks, everything from something very simple like restarting a service to something much more elaborate where we're sending emails and generating reports as well as restarting applications. So for those who, I know probably everyone's seen a little bit of this, but we want to make sure that we all had kind of a bigger picture. So if there's no questions, we can end. If anyone has any questions they want to send separately, that's fine too. You can send it right to me, Jonathan, or to Pete DiBetta, who's actually been sitting right next to me and guiding me through the demo. But hopefully this was, again, informative. In terms of the training webinars, we'll be doing others in the near future. We'll send a notification out, but they'll be posted on our website as well. If you want to, you can subscribe to the webinar notifications, but they'll include things like setting up those remote performance clients that we discussed. We'll also do some specific things on automation, as well as creating dashboards and other specific things. Also, we'll do some on load generation and HFM rules profiling as well. Okay. With that, I don't see any questions, so we can end now. Again, thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully this was useful, and I would actually appreciate, because we're just getting this started, I would appreciate feedback one way or another if there's something that you think that we can improve on, whether it's the pace or how much time we spend or the samples. Please let me know. Again, we want to make this so it's useful for the people, for everyone joining. So please send me any feedback you have. Okay. But thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.